Hello and welcome everyone to Jerome Foundation's 2025 New York City film production information webinar. We're joining you today from the homeland of the Dakota people, Minnesota Makoche, also called Minnesota, and current home of 11 tribes, 4 Dakota and 7 Anishinaabe, and from the lands of the Lenape, Munsee, Canarsie, and many other tribes, in what is also called New York City. We honor and respect the tribal sovereignty, rights, and cultural resilience of the many Native and Indigenous peoples connected to these lands. I'm Eleanor Savage. I'm the president of Jerome Foundation, and I'm pronoun flexible, and I'll invite my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is TA, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm one of the program officers at Jerome Foundation, and I'm based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nell Augustin. I use she, they pronouns. I'm the program strategist at the Jerome Foundation based out of New York City.
And I'm Andrea Brown. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the finance and operations manager at Jerome.
And if you have any access needs as we move through the webinar, please private chat Nell, and she will try to help you. This session will be recorded and posted to our website if you want to revisit it later.
So we've got about an hour together today, and our agenda is to share a bit about our founder, Jerome Hill, and Jerome Foundation, provide an overview of the film production grant, review the eligibility requirements, and we'll spend a good amount of time focusing on eligibility. This is because we value you and your time, and our hope is to ensure that only eligible filmmakers are investing their time in this application process. We'll walk through the application, the review process, and the review criteria. This information is available in the program information and application guide, which you can download from our website, and I'll drop that link into the chat now. And so we'll leave time at the end of this session for a Q&A. You'll notice that your audio is muted, but you can click on the Q&A button to type in your questions. And if you want to send your question anonymously, just make sure you check that box before you send it in.
Great, and I will share a little bit more about who we are. So the Jerome Foundation was established in 1964 by Jerome Hill, a filmmaker, composer, painter, and philanthropist. He started his film career by releasing 2 short films with Warner Brothers and won an Academy Award in 1957 for his documentary, Albert Schweitzer. He turned to experimental film in the 1960s, incorporating nonlinear storytelling, like painting directly onto the film stock, using abstract imagery, integrating soundscapes and music, and exploring memory and dream sequences. His works are in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art, and you can view them on our website on the founder page. In addition to his own work, he supported many experimental filmmakers and other artists during his lifetime before starting Jerome Foundation. Jerome Foundation is unique among funders, and our sole focus is on funding early career artists and the arts organizations that serve early career artists in Minnesota, which is Jerome Hill's home state, and the 5 boroughs of New York City, where Jerome lived most of his adult life.
We want to share information about Jerome Foundation's principles and values in the spirit of transparency. We want you to understand what guides our grant making and how this is integrated into our application, as well as the review criteria for evaluating applications. So through our principles, which you'll see on screen, we are committed to eliminating disparities and improving access and outcomes to ensure the equitable viability of artists, culture bearers, and arts organizations in our funding areas, Minnesota and New York City. And we are focused on creating belonging for diverse artists whose cultural narratives and practices have been and continue to be excluded. We recognize that there is a dynamic relationship between our values of creative risk-taking and innovation. And we support artists who expand, question, experiment with, or reimagine creative practices and experiences across artistic fields. And what we mean by humility is that we work for artists rather than the reverse. And we believe that artists are the best authorities to define their needs and challenges. We wanted to support artists who embrace their roles as part of a larger community of artists and citizens, and who consciously work with a sense of purpose and responsibility. We hope that sharing this information about our focus helps you in considering your alignment with Jerome's priorities.
The production grant provides up to $30,000 for a film that will be in production between November 2025 and April 2027. Grant funds may be used to support other stages of production, but must include production. This grant supports early career film directors who reside in the 5 boroughs of New York City and work in the ever-expanding genres of experimental, narrative, animation, documentary, or any other hybrid combination of these forms. Both individual directors and co-directing teams may apply. Please note, co-directors will submit a single application and share the grant funds equally. Grants are awarded only to the directors or the co-directing team. Funds are issued only to individuals or single-member LLCs. Applications may not be submitted by fiscal sponsors, production companies, studios, multi-member LLCs, or other organizations, such as nonprofits. Here on the slide, you can see the 2023 round of the New York City Production Grant Program. Over 200 applications were received and 12 production grants totaling $348,000 were awarded. You can find detailed information about past grantees, their films, and demographic information from the link that Andrea will drop in the chat.
So the application is now open, and we'll next have a workshop on the application questions on February 4th, and we'll have a live Q&A session on March 18th, so you can drop in and ask any questions you might have. We also ask that you have any eligibility-related phone appointments with Jerome staff by March 28th. We'll also have CV, work sample, and film budget webinars available on our website after January 27th. Those will highlight best practices for developing these application materials. And I'll drop these links to register for these events in the chat. One thing I also want to note is that the application deadline is Thursday, April 3rd, and the application time deadline is before 5 p.m. Eastern time. We do not accept late applications, so please take a note of this. The deadline is at midnight. It's 5 p.m. Eastern. You'll be notified of your status no later than October 20th, and we will publicly announce the grantees in the fall of 2025. Grantees will be able to receive funds between November 2025 and April 2027.
So to start with the application process, in working on your application, we strongly urge you to start by reading the program and application guide. We provide this detailed information because we know the time it takes to complete a grant application and want to be fully transparent about the requirements. We also encourage reviewing the support materials we offer, such as the CV, work sample, and budget workshop webinars. These will be available, as Andrea noted, via links on our website after January 27th. The eligibility quiz is required before getting to the main application. This is to help avoid anyone who's not eligible from investing valuable time and energy in completing an application. And if you have questions, we welcome you to make an appointment with Jerome staff. We are open and available to assist you with anything. So now we'll walk through in detail the eligibility requirements. And please note that if you are applying as a co-directing team, all members of the team must meet all eligibility requirements. We'll start with the Jerome Foundation aligned focus. So we support early career film directors with a clear ongoing commitment to filmmaking who engage in creative risk-taking. The foundation considers risk broadly and invites you to share the ways you define and are engaging in creative risk-taking. How are you expanding, questioning, experimenting with your own approach to filmmaking? We seek filmmakers pursuing innovative approaches who have a clarity of purpose and vision for imaginative storytelling, who are engaged directly with those involved in their filmmaking, and who work to build relationships with and impact their creative community and field. There's more detail about all of this in the review criteria section of the program and application guide, beginning on page 10. For geographic focus, applicants must be residents of the 5 boroughs of New York City and who have been residents for at least 1 year at the time of the application and plan to be residents during the span of the grant period, which is through April 2027. Please note that Jerome does not require citizenship, but does require residency and a social security number or ITIN number for tax purposes.
There are requirements as well related to the types of films that are eligible for the grant. The production grant is open to filmmakers creating a short or feature-length experimental, narrative, animation, documentary, or hybrid film. Films must be in production between November 2025 and April 2027. Funds can be used to support all stages of production, but at least 50% of the funds must be directed towards production. Films that will solely be in development or pre-production during the grant period should not apply in this round, and films that have completed production and moved into post are also not eligible. The program does not fund retroactively. Only costs incurred after the grant is awarded and the grant agreement is signed will be supported. Grantees must accept all funds between November 13th, 2025 and April 2027, but are not expected to complete the film by April 2027. We urge you to think carefully about your film schedule before applying. A production grant is awarded only once per film. Next to experience level. Jerome Foundation expansively frames the early career spectrum as film directors with at least a 2-year track record of directing and presenting their own projects, i.e. not a first-time film director, and with no more than 10 years of directorial experience. Age is not a factor in determining eligibility or career status. The Foundation recognizes that career paths can be nonlinear and disrupted along the way, and the Foundation additionally acknowledges the number and types of opportunities afforded to directors may differ significantly based on race and ethnicity, class, gender, physical ability, geography, and other factors. We also recognize that some directors may experience significant success and move past early career status well before their 10th year of practice. In the eligibility quiz, there's a detailed listing of awards and prizes that impact eligibility for this grant. If you wish to discuss any aspect of your eligibility, you should take the eligibility quiz and contact Jerome staff no later than March 28th to discuss.
Here I'll share a little bit more about our eligibility requirements around the projects and work sample requirements. The Foundation funds early career film directors who have created enough work to communicate who they are as makers, their unique style, and their original voice. Eligibility is limited to filmmakers who have at least 2 completed film projects, a minimum of 10 minutes total running time, and no more than 2 feature-length film directing credits for fully produced works, running time of 50 minutes or more per film. Produced works are those that you have completed and released through distribution on streaming platforms or broadcast networks, cable television, national public media, screened through theatrical, educational, and/or festivals, or acquired by film distribution companies. There are also requirements for your work samples. Applicants must provide information on the location or platform where the work has been screened. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to back up. About the work samples. Applicants are required to provide 2 work samples of completed films they have directed. The 2 work samples must have been completed and publicly screened and not just self-presented and made post-enrollment in a degree program if that's applicable. And I said that line about providing information on the location or platform where your work has been screened. Films that have been presented through a film director's own platforms or through uncurated or sign-up or first-come, first-served formats are not considered publicly screened. Film directors who are entirely self-presented and who have no additional engagement opportunities with their community through public screenings, festivals, and/or competitive grants or prizes are not eligible. For individual applicants, work samples must be solely directed works, not work completed as part of a co-directing team. And for co-directing applicant teams, work samples must be works completed by the co-directors named in the applications, so not solo works or works done as part of different co-directing teams. This program requires that the applicant be the director of the proposed film. This is an individual artist grant awarded to directors of new original film projects. That is, the director applying must own the copyright of the project, have artistic, budgetary, and editorial control, and be listed in the film credits as the director. Commercial, industrial, or work for hire, PSAs, journalistic work, short turnaround filmmaking contest videos, or music videos over which the film director does not have creative control cannot be used to confirm eligibility and cannot be the focus of a grant project or used for work samples. We understand the creative value of this work, but because of its nature, it does not provide panelists the opportunity to understand the film director's voice and vision.
Great. Now I'll address some eligibility requirements for co-applicant teams. As was stated previously, co-directing teams of 2 directors may apply as long as both applicants meet all of the individual artist eligibility requirements. So to go into more detail, only eligible co-directors may be included in the application. For example, someone who is a resident of California or who is a producer or cinematographer but not also a director on the project cannot be included in the application. Co-directing applicants may not submit work samples directed individually or co-directed with anyone other than the co-applicant. Applicants will be required to affirm co-creation of all work samples. Co-directing applicants may not include individually created projects or projects co-directed with other artists not included in the application to establish their eligibility. Co-directors submit a single application and will share the grant funds equally. To apply, all co-director applicants must meet all of the eligibility requirements for individual film directors. Finally, producers, cinematographers, screenwriters, editors, actors, or other interdisciplinary artists who are not also primarily film directors are not eligible. So for example, an editor or actor who is looking to make their first film is not eligible for this grant. And and a choreographer making a dance film, a visual artist who's looking to incorporate video as a part of an installation, a technology-centered artist, game creator, or an artist doing interactive work is also not eligible. Moving next to age, there are some eligibility requirements for age, simply that the applicant must be at least 18 years of age. Otherwise, age is not a determining factor for the early career stage. Artists may begin directing their own original work at any age.
Here are the requirements around education. We actually don't have a requirement. We do not require formal training or a degree that is unexpected or required. Filmmakers who are currently enrolled in a degree granting program are not eligible. So this includes MFA, a PhD, or a low residency MFA. Filmmakers who have graduated by April 3rd, 2025, which is the deadline, must have projects created outside of their time in a degree program to meet the work sample requirements for eligibility. The number of years in a degree program are deducted, so to speak, from the total 10 years counted towards that 2 to 10-year cap of Jerome's early career parameter. Full-time tenured faculty or the equivalent at any college, university, or institution of higher learning at the time of application or as of April 3rd, 2025 are also not eligible to apply. Now on to some criteria specific to your status with the Jerome Foundation. Filmmakers may not apply with more than one application. So that is, you cannot apply as an individual and also part as a co-directing team, or apply as multiple co-directing teams, or apply for multiple projects. Eligible filmmakers who have previously received Jerome grants are eligible if they have completed or are up to date on all reporting requirements for any grant received from the Jerome Foundation, including the Jerome Hill Artist Fellowship, Jerome at Camargo, or a previous film production or filmmaker mentorship grants. Directors who have received a production grant through this program may not reapply for additional funding for the same film. A single film may not receive more than one grant from this program. Directors who have received a grant through this program previously may not apply for funding for a new film until that previous grant is completed. And Jerome Hill Artist Fellows may not use this grant to support the same costs covered by the fellowship funding.
Next, we'll move to eligible projects. So these include new works of any length in the genres of animation, documentary, experimental, and narrative, or any combination of these forms. The foundation has no preferences for subject matter or genre. Panels who review applications and recommend grants are asked to equally consider all genres and forms. Any budget, large or small, qualifies. Applicants are expected to demonstrate their experience and capacity for the proposed story, content, and form. If a project involves or focuses on specific people or communities, applicants will be asked to demonstrate the degree to which meaningful relationships with the film participants have been developed. The program supports film directors who present work in non-traditional venues, in addition to those who screen in movie theaters, festivals, or broadcast channels. Grassroots screenings may take place in community centers, churches, restaurants, residence halls, health clinics, outdoor spaces, and other places where people gather, including virtual spaces. On the next slide, you'll see a chart of the kinds of expenses that the foundation funds related to the various stages of production. The key to keep in mind is that this is a production grant. Though all stages of production are eligible for support, this grant cannot be used solely for pre-production, post-production, or distribution. At least 50% of the funds must be used for production. Films that are primarily in post during the grant period are of a lower funding priority. And the proposed project must be in production at some point during the grant period of November 2025 through April 2027. Funds may not be used for study in a degree granting program or commercial or promotional production.
Okay, now we'll move into the application. So after completing the eligibility quiz, you will be invited into the application. And it starts with some basic questions about you and your film project. You will ask you to provide work samples accompanied by additional contextual and factual information, CV, and respond to questions related to the review criteria and a budget. The program guide includes the application questions so you can see what they are before you start that application and submittable. And Andrea will drop the link here.
Work samples are a critical component of your application. You must be credited as the director on all submitted work samples, and all work samples must be work that you yourself have conceived and generated. We ask for Vimeo or YouTube links to the full work if possible. Trailers are not permitted. 2 work samples must be from completed works. You should not submit rough cuts or works in progress for your required samples. You will identify 10 minutes total across both work samples for the panelists to review. Panelists want to see uninterrupted sequences of work in real time. In addition, a 3rd work sample is optional for those applicants who are submitting works in progress footage of the project they're applying with. If you've started production on your project, we encourage you to include a sample of that material. You'll identify 3 minutes for panelists to watch for that additional optional 3rd work sample. Next, for each work sample, we ask for the Vimeo or YouTube link and a password if applicable, a description including the name of the work, year completed, running time, where the work has been publicly screened, any awards or grants received in support of the project, your role or roles in the project. Note that, again, you must be credited as the director. You may have other roles in addition, like editor or producer, that you can list here. Your cue-in times for your work sample, keeping in mind those time limits. Note that you can only provide 1 cue-in point and sequence per sample. Panelists want to see uninterrupted sequences of the work in real time. So for the cue-in point, you would say something like start at 3 minutes, 30 seconds and end at 8 minutes. You would not say start at 1 minute, go to 1 minute 30, jump to 2:45, and stay in through 3:45. You have the opportunity to give context for the work sample as well. Remember that people may or may not know you and your work, and will be looking at these cue-in excerpts and sequences while reviewing your work. You might, for example, want to write about how the scene you are choosing fits into the larger arc of your work, or if there are any specific stylistic aspects of the work you want panelists to pay attention to. For the in-progress work sample, you might also note what work remains to be done on the project. We will also post a video that goes into deeper depth about recommendations on how to build a work sample on our website again after January 27th. For anyone applying with a narrative film or a hybrid film with a narrative element, we require a script sample for the proposed project. You are asked to upload the full film script as a PDF. The script excerpt allows the panel to gauge the quality of the writing and assess your ability to create character, structure, and rhythm. If you don't have a final script, you can upload a draft or a partial script. If you don't have any form of a script, the panel will not have enough information to consider your proposal, and you should not apply in this round. If you work in narrative film, but do not work from scripts and instead rely on an improvised process, you must explain that process and submit an alternative to the script sample. For example, an improvisational structure or outline that helps the panel assess your skills in directing unscripted work. You are also strongly encouraged to make sure that at least one of your work samples was developed through this improvised process. A concept, storyboard, or project outline may be provided for films of any genre, but it is not required. You also have the option to upload a storyboard, outline, lookbook, visual concept that helps panelists gauge how you're developing the film characters, structure, rhythm, and visual storytelling.
Next, I'll share a little bit more about the CV component. CVs must be current and complete and clearly represent your film directing experience and any related film experience. Bios and resumes are not acceptable for this application. The CV is your chance to present your background, experience, and accomplishments to the panel. You must have a section at the top that clearly lists your directed work. Do not group your directing work with your other film experience, like your editing, acting work, etc. These should be in separate sections. Please be specific about project titles, length of the project, year of completion, and your specific roles on each film. If you are applying as a co-directing team, each individual will upload their own CV. We will post a video that walks through tips on organizing your film director CV to our website after January 27th.
Another element of the application is your responses to questions, both about your proposed film project, as well as you as a film director. The application is organized into sections based on the review criteria panelists use to evaluate your application, and we'll go into those review criteria in detail in a little bit. There are suggested maximum lengths you should follow. Now, this won't be enforced by Submittable because we don't want you to have to rewrite things just to save a word here or there, but you're strongly suggested to operate within those recommendations. While Submittable does save your work as you go along, you might find it helpful to draft your responses in Word, Pages, or Google Docs, and then copy paste them into Submittable. That way you can keep track of your word count. In addition to the questions, you'll find further instruction below the text field in Submittable. So make sure to address all those details when you're responding to the questions. There's one question where you have an option to respond either in writing or by uploading a video. That question is, how do you see your work as innovative, and/or what creative risks are you taking to deepen and expand film or video forms? We provide the option of video as an alternative to writing to allow you to respond in the medium in which you feel greatest comfort in conveying to the panel a sense of who you are. If you choose a video response, do not do an artistic video that attempts to, artistically answer the questions or tries to squeeze in more work samples. There's no need for high production values here. We're just looking for a clean audio and video. In fact, we encourage you just to, record your phone, make this recording using your phone and upload that video file to your application.
Great. In your application, you will also provide a budget. We provide a template in the application to give you an idea of the level of detail we are looking for and how to organize the fields. If you've already created a budget, that's great. You can use it as long as it includes all the information that's also on the template. We will post a video going into greater depth about how to build a film production budget on our website after January 27th.
That's me. Sorry, I was answering a question. All right, so a little bit about our review process. So the Jerome Foundation staff first pre-screens applications to confirm your basic eligibility. Applications are then reviewed by an independent panel comprised of film directors and film professionals with wide-ranging experience in New York City and beyond. Panels are constructed to ensure that no single race or ethnicity constitutes a majority and represents diversity in gender, age, and experience as well. A list of past panelists for this and other programs is available at our website, and we'll drop the link into the chat so you can check it out. Panelists then identify a group of finalists to be discussed at a full-day meeting where they will arrive at a collective set of recommendations that are then reviewed and approved by the Jerome Foundation's Board of Directors. Finalists, including grantees, will be invited to set up a feedback appointment if they wish.
Okay, so next we're going to move into the review criteria, which is the information that we provide to you as applicants, as well as to the panelists, to understand how the applications are evaluated. We provide the same information to panelists as we do to applicants so that everyone is working with the same definitions. There's no hidden criteria or agendas. The review criteria are creative risk and vision, creative engagement and impact, and feasibility. And in addition, we prioritize supporting artists who share the Foundation's core values, which we shared earlier, and the panelists are charged to recommend a cohort of grantees that captures the diversity of the film field. All right, so diving in more deeply into the specific criteria, creative risk and vision, the Foundation intentionally embraces risk-taking and curiosity as an emergent strategy for discovering and developing new ideas, methods, or approaches that have the potential for innovative and transformative outcomes. Jerome does not have a singular definition of risk, but the context for this value is framed by our commitments to intersectional racial equity and our values of risk, innovation, and humility. We recognize that not every risk-taking experience results in success, and we fully support trying and failing as part of the creative process. We consider risk broadly through the ways artists are expanding, questioning, experimenting with, or imagining film forms, practices, and approaches in unique ways. The Foundation acknowledges that definitions of risk related to resources tend to focus on risk avoidance, framing people as risks through the lens of racism and other forms of oppression. Not Jerome. We encourage and support artists to intentionally test, push, question, and experiment, and we welcome artists to share the ways that they are exploring creative risk. And we recognize that inviting risk requires a respectful and nurturing environment built on trusting relationships. We strive to support your work in a culture of care and belonging. We celebrate curiosity, learning, empowerment, and healing over punishment, hierarchy, extraction, and exclusion. You'll see on screen and on page 11 of the program and application guide some of the ways that filmmakers who have received this grant have defined creative risk. We're sharing these examples because there is a question in the application asking you how you define creative risk for yourself. And what we're looking for in terms of creative vision is to support filmmakers who embrace their roles and relationships for building community, have a clarity of purpose that is distinctive and authentic, and is focused on creating and sharing deeply considered imaginative stories.
Here I'll share about the second criteria, which is creative engagement and impact. This value is inspired by the Foundation's value around humility. This grant intends to support filmmakers who embrace their roles as part of a larger community of artists and citizens who work with a sense of purpose and responsibility. Panelists want to understand why this project is important, the applicant's relationship to the subject matter and/or connection to the communities involved, and the desired impact of the film. Panelists assess the potential impact of the film on the director's career, as well as the director's potential impact on the larger field or community. Panelists will also assess whether the director has a clear idea of the community, participants, and/or audience for the film, and how to work in relationship with them from creation to completion of the project. The application questions on timeliness and relevance, the applicant's self-assessment of their work, and the CV are all used to assess the impact of this filmmaker in their project.
The third criteria is feasibility and the potential that a film can be made. Applicants are asked to provide detailed information about their project, their role or roles in the production, the project status and timeline, the production budget, including fundraising status and contingency plan, the creative team, and any producing partners or collaborators from the community involved, and finally, the distribution plan and goals. Panelists will assess whether the planning is appropriate for the scope of the project and if the film director and their assembled team demonstrate the capacity for completing this project as proposed. Understanding that every filmmaker is under-resourced and the innumerable ways inequity impacts access to resources, financial need is not a criterion panelists use to assess applications.
And finally, remember that applications are due before 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, April 3rd. Late applications will not be accepted and incomplete applications will not be considered. Once applications are submitted and the deadline closes, they may not be edited or updated. In order to troubleshoot any potential issues that may come up, internet outages, slow upload times, things like that, please try to submit your application in advance of that deadline. You'll receive a confirmation screen as well as a confirmation email when your submission has gone through. Until you see those, your application is still in draft mode. And remember, I'm available if you have any questions or need any assistance with the online application. We'll also be in touch if there are issues with your application related to accessing your work samples. But we do ask that you please don't take any links down or change passwords for your video links, anything like that, until you've heard your application status. And this will happen no later than October 20th. So we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of today's session. As a reminder, to ask your question, click on the Q&A button in your menu, and remember to click the box to send anonymously if you want to do that. If you have a question that's really specific to your project or to your eligibility status, we invite you to make an appointment with TA or Nell, and I will drop that link into the chat here. And I'll do that, and then we can get going with some of the questions that we have. So thanks all for adding those in. We've got a question here about the project status, wanting clarification on the project must not be in just pre-production. So what level should it be on if you're still waiting on funding? Will having a producer on board and a cast attached help?
I'm happy to take that one. So it can be in pre-production. It just has to be in production at some point during the grant period. If you haven't started on pre-production, that's when that would be a concern, because getting from pre-production all the way through production might not seem doable. Again, this is the primary focus of this is as a production grant. So it just has to be in production during that grant period of fall 2025 through spring 2027. It's about an 18-month period. Definitely having a producer and some of those other things are helpful information related to the criteria of feasibility.
So this next person has a film that's completed outside of their matriculation, time during school, but it was written during their time in school. Can they still use it as a work sample?
Yes, as long as it wasn't completed during your degree program, it can be used as a sample.
For documentaries, which is constantly in flux, what is expected to be provided as a script?
Happy to take a swing at this one. So I'm glad you asked this question. The script provisions were really focused on narrative films and hybrid films. If you're not making that kind of film, we don't expect to see a script. That being said, we hope that when you're talking about kind of the arc of your film, if there is one, that you have a sense of where you want to bring the viewer, but we are not looking for a 100-page script for a documentary.
If a film was a short and screened for investors, actors, and crew who were a part of the film, at a private screening, would that count and be eligible as a work sample? Would you need us to provide this information in the application? And does the work sample have to be publicly presented at the time of application?
The work sample does have to be publicly presented at the time of the application. The kind of private screening that you're describing is not what we would consider a public screening. It's more about publicly sharing your work with your audience. And that can be an informal, it doesn't have to be a formal festival. It doesn't have to be a formal, theatrical release. It can be informal.
I'm going to lift up a question that I see in the chat here. Are there any specific limits or restrictions specific to episodic projects? Well, of course, taking into account the 50% production cost requirement.
The one thing I can think of is related to work samples. So you need 2 work samples, and you can't use 2 different episodes of the same episodic series as your 2 work samples. So you can use 1 work sample from that series, but not 2. But I can't think of anyone else have any things around episodic. Yeah, we do support episodic work.
A question here about creative risk. The question is, so just to be clear about creative risk, can this only concern the narrative form of the short film? And can it be satisfied separately from aesthetic risks?
I'm not sure about the relationship to narrative form. Creative risk is a review criteria that applies to all different forms, whether it's short form, long form, narrative, documentary, all the different forms. And I would encourage you to review what we've shared as different kinds of risks, the examples that we've shared in that program guide. And that might be helpful. And if you still have questions, feel free to reach out.
A question here, what if your project already received funding through a fellowship, but needs more funding to finish shooting and production? Are those projects able to apply?
I can take this one since I was just in mid-sentence. Generally, yes, but remember that we want you to think about the step, like where you're at with your project. So again, 50% of the funds of this grant funds will need to go towards production. So if you think about kind of where you're at with your project, if there's enough, filming and production work to do that you can dedicate, 50% of the grant towards, then yes, partially funded projects are eligible. But yeah, projects that are just in post, for example, are not eligible. So just think about where you're at in terms of your project.
I'm going to loop back real quickly to creative risk again, because I think we got some clarification. Can creative risk relate to doing a short film about currently marginalized people? And does the foundation have any fear of blowback if we were to highlight the experiences of an oppressed people, again, that's currently considered controversial?
I don't know in terms of blowback. The thing to consider is that, are you part of a marginalized community, or do you have relationships with the community that you are engaging with? That's a critical piece related to the criteria of engagement and impact. And so, there's a real interest from the panel in terms of what is the level of consent there, what is the relationship there, And so how are you moving forward the content that you're working with? Anyone else want to add to that?
I think I just note that, there's no kind of point in favor when it comes to subject matter or genre or anything like that, that is like directed towards the panelists.
Mm-hmm. We don't censor work in any way. We don't have any directives or priorities around the content or the themes or the projects that are being presented.
We're going to switch to a second for a minute, I think, to focus on some like work sample eligibility knots to untangle perhaps, that hopefully are applicable to a lot of folks on this call. So one question, if a music video was made during college, but not for a class, but using school equipment, is the music video ineligible as a sample?
Yes, music videos are ineligible as work samples because it's not a type of sample that we accept. And in addition, if it was made during your time in a degree granting program, whether it was part of a class assignment or not, it's not eligible.
Slightly connected. If someone's done an experimental film made to a music piece, but it's not a music video per se, and it has shown in an experimental film fest, can that be considered a work sample?
I'm going to say yes. It sure can.
I think you'll want to make sure in the context field, because sometimes something might seem, if something seems like a music video, you'll need to articulate, how you see it as an experimental film, not as a music video.
So someone has wrote and directed a film that's been screened at film festivals. The film was made while they were attending a degree program, but it wasn't an MFA or a film school. Would that disqualify them? I'd say disqualify them if they used it as one of their required work samples.
Mm. Such a tricky question. I think I would encourage you to make an appointment with Nell or TA to take a look at that with your CV.
Could we maybe elaborate a little bit on what we mean when we talk about quote unquote like informal screenings?
Nell, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So there are all different exhibition opportunities where you may have the opportunity to share your film, right? So there's traditional forms, which might be theatrical settings, festivals, maybe your film has been acquired and broadcast nationally. But then there's another category, which is known as semi-theatrical or grassroots settings. So these are not traditional theaters, but places like a community center, a church, a makerspace, a residence hall. It's any place where people gather to watch your film. So as long as people are gathering themselves and showing up to watch your work, that's what we mean by informal. I hope that helps.
Another question related to presentation. Can the work samples have been screened in an art gallery as part of another artist's work? In this example, someone's shot a documentary about an artist project, and it was then shown in a gallery side by side with their artwork. Would that count as a public presentation or showing?
The question here would be, is the documentary your creative work, or is it part of the other artist's work? And so there would be questions about, who has the copyright if it's your own original work. And again, that kind of nuanced question, I would say, work with TA and Nell to really dive into that and make sure.
A question I'm going to lift from the chat is, if someone is filming a documentary or a narrative film abroad, but they live in New York City, is that okay? Or is the foundation more enthusiastic about projects that are shot locally in New York City?
Yeah, this is a great question. The applicant must primarily reside in New York City, but the film does not need to be about New York City or shot in New York City. It can, yeah, we don't dictate kind of where and what you want to, have a film about. Hope that answers that question. Yes, great. Thanks for the question.
Question about the budget. In the budget breakdown, should we include other grants that have already been secured as part of the total budget, even if they're smaller, maybe micro grants?
Yes, we ask for your complete budget and whether that funding is secured or pending. And so anything that you already have secured is great. And just expanding on that a little bit, Jerome is and has been sometimes the first funder in, and we're fine with that, but we're also completely fine being one of many funders or funding ways of funding your film.
One thing I want to point out is, if you've asked a question in here and maybe we haven't addressed it, it's probably because it's something that requires a little bit more nuance and untangling and would be a great subject for a phone appointment with TA and Nell. So if you're not finding that your questions are answered in this situation, I would encourage you to make an appointment with them. One question here is, where on the website can I find the link to see if one is eligible for this grant? And I can answer that. When you go to the program page, in the program timeline, the first item there is to, start up in Submittable. So when you click on that link to Submittable, before you get to the full application with those questions we talked about, the work samples, the CV, all of that, before you even get there, you'll kind of stop at an eligibility quiz. And, depending on your responses to that eligibility quiz, you'll either move on to the full application, we'll say, can't really tell without having a phone appointment, or kind of on the face of this, it looks like you're not eligible for this opportunity. And if you kind of think that that's inaccurate, you're encouraged to reach out to us as well. And again, I'll direct your attention to the chat. It's also in our materials and on our website to make that phone appointment. You'll go to that Calendly link. That'll let you find a time that works for both you and our staff and kind of connects you in that way. Let's see, I'm not at the moment.
Can creative risk apply to using allegory to tell a story? Yes. As I shared, we don't have a set definition, and you get to share with the panel how you define creative risk, and then kind of share what you're working with and how this is a risk for you. And is a curated online screening platform such as No Budge an eligible location for one of your two pieces of work to have played? Again, with the public screening versus self-screening, if the platform is curated or programmed versus you just upload your work, it needs to be something that is a curated, programmed space in order for it to count as publicly screened.
One question on the CV. Is it worthwhile to include experiences that would be ineligible as work samples, like unscreened works or commercial works?
Yeah, you can definitely include that. The big thing is to make sure that you put that in a different list with a separate heading. So unscreened works or commercial work. And really make a distinct section that is your own film work. I see a hand raised, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that may have been an accident.
Okay,
Either way, we don't have that attendee still with us right now.
okay.
So at this point, we've made our way through the open questions. Again, just like to thank everybody and remind you that, you can make appointments with us to talk through things. You can see our emails, send us questions. We want to be available and open to you throughout this process to answer any questions that pop up as you get into things.
Thank you all for joining us. And where will this video be posted?
Yeah, so we'll post this on the help and resources page on our website once it's available. Also, if you, signed up, registered to attend this webinar, we'll send a recording to you kind of direct by email as well. We expect it to be ready in the next couple days. Thanks, everyone.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, and best of luck. April 3rd.